Welcome to episode 14 of Founders and Funders. This week I have Jay on the show from EQ Minds. Welcome to the show, Jay.
It's great to be here. Long time since I've seen you last, so I'm very excited.
It's been over a decade, close to 15 years since I saw you last, but a lot has happened since. So for our listeners who are not familiar, tell us a little bit about what EQ Mind does.
Yeah, so EQ Minds is a mental health and mindfulness company, and we're very fortunate. We get to work with many amazing countries across Australia and indeed across the globe. And we trade tens of thousands of people, primarily in the corporate and business space, on how to improve their mental health and their performance. So we do this via keynotes, wellbeing programs, and workshops. And we've been at it since about 2016, when my wife actually started the company after she suffered severe postnatal depression, and she basically never wanted anyone else to go through that. And that's how we were born.
Nice. And you're the first guest who is working with their partner in a business. How does that work out?
Oh, how long does the podcast go for? A bit more time. Look, I'm very lucky. My wife is amazing. She is fantastic, but it doesn't come without its challenges. There is definitely challenges that happen, but I follow a very simple rule, and it has kept us still together. We're not divorced yet. And that is, she was the one that really started the company. So she's the boss. And as long as, if I don't agree with the decision, as long as it's not going to blow up the company and we're at a loggerhead, she wins because she's the boss. And that has helped us in our journey very much.
Nice. And so you mentioned the inspiration for her starting the company. I know you from your time in banking in Sydney, and I know that you played sports. How did you become part of EQ Minds? What drew you to work on this with her?
Yeah. So, I mean, we started it together. It was her idea and really part of her journey to start off with, to be perfectly honest with you. And I was sort of on the sidelines. I was, working in banking. So I was sort of helping funding it in the early stages because, as many of your audience will know, you don't make any money for quite a while when you start up a new company. So I was helping her out on the business side of things, very closely looking at sort of how it was going. And I sort of had my own journey into mental health and mindfulness, which we'll probably uncover a little bit later on during this conversation that we have. So I was really interested in it. But then when that happened, it really propelled me into it. And plus, the business was going really well. So it seemed like a great time to move across.
Nice. Cool. We touched on briefly that your banking background and you played sports, but let's go further back. So what shaped your early childhood?
Yeah, so I was really lucky. I sort of won the lottery. I had amazing parents, super supportive, and I grew up on the south coast of New South Wales, a beautiful little coastal town. I did go to a public school, so sort of nothing was given to me. We had to work for it, the school of hard knocks, as I like to say. But it was, a fantastic upbringing, and I think it was a little bit simpler back then too. We didn't have so much connection with in terms of social media. So you sort of only knew what you knew, which was around you. Whereas today, I think there's a lot of other variables that come into play with it.
Yeah. And then you grew up there. What got you into sports and banking? You grew up in the South Coast. I mean, I think I've enjoyed going down the South Coast to go surfing. So that's what I did. What things were you doing in your early childhood, and how did you end up in banking?
Yeah. So my father is actually from the US, and he is mad keen into basketball. So he was on the first ever year that the National Basketball League launched. So he was mad into basketball and sort of took it everywhere he went, played some college ball, and then moved down to the South Coast where it was pretty much non existent. And he started building it up. So I sort of had a basketball in my hand right from the time that I could walk. And so had a bit of a leg up in that space. Obviously played a lot. He coached me a lot. And from that, I really thought that I was going to grow up and have this amazing professional career as a basketball player. We all dream, about playing in the NBA, and then you realize realistically you don't quite have the physical attributes that will get you there. But I was very fortunate. It gave me a lot of opportunities. I made a number of different teams, including playing for Australia in the schoolboys team, and then continuing on playing basketball as I was studying at universities. Got to travel the world with it, and it certainly shaped me as a person. helped me with so many different things and gave me all these different opportunities. But when reality sort of sets in and you realize there's not actually a lot of money in basketball in Australia, especially if you're, not one of the superstars. And so at the same time, my parents always made sure that I was studying while I was playing. And so after I'd finished university and then had a little bit of a crack at basketball, I gave that up and moved into banking. And I guess the reason I went into banking wasn't like I was really passionate about it or anything like that. I probably saw many bad news movies where people were driving fast cars and probably pretty looking girls around them. And so that sort of led me into the world of banking.
What was your career like in banking when we worked together? You were in sales. What were your roles like when you got into banking?
So started out sort of just trying to get any job I could. I think I started out working in the treasury department of a small little bank. I think it was actually a building society. This was a long time ago. And then I moved up to Sydney and did some banking there, but it was probably a little bit more we did investment lending back
Mhm.
then. And so, providing funding on listed equities was pretty personable, could have a chat. So I was sort of always on the sort of customer side of things. And then that just naturally led me into sales again, pretty poorly, probably not showing my great character here, but you sort of follow the money and that's where the money was back in those days. So I ended up doing sales and a variety of different sales roles, working in a variety of different banks, went over to London, spent some time at Deutsche Bank in London, then returned home and ended up my last corporate role. I was in a bank and I was sort of looking after a front office or the sales and service parts of a banking division. And that's sort of where I finished up before I moved across to EQ Mines.
When you left the bank, what wasn't feeling right for you or what didn't resonate with you to stay? I knew when I left, my mentor told me to go work at a startup because I had so much energy and I think the pace of the bank was just didn't resonate with me. What was your feelings when you wrapped up your banking career?
Yeah, very similar in that, the banks, they're fantastic and you learn so many different skills in them. And I think everyone should go work at a big corporate to learn about procedures and structures. But if you're looking to do things fast, if you're looking to be agile, move and change, it can be very frustrating. And so that starts to wear on you quite a bit. Sort of pair that up with the fact that I was never really that passionate about what I was doing. Don't get me wrong, I had great jobs. I worked with amazing people. I was super fortunate and so very lucky, but I didn't love it. And so when EQ Mines was born from my beautiful wife, we sort of looked at it and you've got financial obligations that you need to meet. And we put some certain targets in place or goals in place, and me thinking, they're pretty challenging, probably won't get there for a while, and then she goes and blows them out of the park pretty quick.
Mhm.
So we sort of said, if you reach these specific goals, I'll come to the business 100% of the time. And my old employer was fantastic. They actually let me take a year off to go and try it to see if we could really make it work.
Nice.
And I never went back, but I'm very appreciative for them.
Yeah, and you mentioned the driver for your wife to start the company. What was your attachment to mental health? And I think during my research, I read about your back injury before. Tell us a little bit more about this and how it's all related.
Yeah, so there was probably two parts to it. So obviously witnessing my wife going through severe postnatal depression, probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. She was incredibly sick for a while there, and it was such a tough time for the family when it's supposed to be such a special time when you get postnatal depression when you've just had your first child. But it was hard and it completely changed her trajectory of her life. So obviously seeing that made me very aware that mental health is a very real thing and impacts people and families so very much. And then for myself, I had a pretty bad back injury where I blew out several discs in my back when I was deadlifting in a gym. The bad thing about that was, or the thing about that was, it wasn't even that I was lifting that heavy. It was
Oh,
it was
wow.
pretty heavy, to be perfectly honest. And did my back, bit of an old basketball injury, and ended up sort of 2 years of my life was completely sidetracked. I barely ate dinner at a dinner table for 2 years. I saw every specialist known to man. I had surgeries,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, hung out with neurosurgeons. I could not get better. And like I like to say, whilst it was my back that was busted, it was really my mind and my mood that became broken from it.
Yeah.
And yeah, My wife was amazing. She stuck with me during this time when I couldn't do anything, although I will admit she, did like to go skiing when I was out of action. So I was very unhappy about that because I'm an avid skier and actually introduced her to skiing, but that didn't stop her from having some amazing trips when I couldn't go. But I watched from the sidelines, and it certainly gave me some inspiration to continue on the journey to try and get better. And so this went along for a long time. I was trying literally everything, and I was, you start going scrolling on the internet, looking at anything. I went vegetarian for a while. I tried to do everything to try and improve my back. Finally, I was accepted into a clinical trial at Neuroscience Australia, and it changed my life and it changed my perspective on mindfulness because they put me through this program. And a big part of it was really just mindfulness. And it was around rewiring my pain pathways using really simple mindfulness tools. And from that, like you think, how does someone who has a back injury start, trying to rewire these pain pathways because I'd created a fake one. My injury had sort of resolved itself, but my brain
Mm,
still said that this injury existed.
yeah.
And from this, I realized, oh my gosh, the mind and the brain is such a powerful thing. And that sort of develops this real interest in neuroscience and mental health and mindfulness. And, from that, I've gone back and done my postgrad studies in mental health and neuroscience. And yeah, it really opened my eyes to the power that our brain has on many things in our life. So going back to my back, went through this mindfulness program and it just completely changed my life. It really, it sounds a bit silly, but it really did save my life because I'm not sure where I would have ended up if I hadn't found them.
Yeah, it's so challenging, especially if you lead a very active life. And it's tied to your identity to not be able to do those things. It can really affect your mood and make you quite down. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely right. Absolutely. Like when you used to be an athlete, I hate to say it, a lot of it was tied to my physical appearance and how I felt and all that exercise. To have that taken away, it was hard. It was really hard. But again, that's also when you find out, that support network, your friends, how important it is, because that's when people really show up.
I'm so curious. It's not so relevant, but I'm very curious. How much weight was this that you were deadlifting?
Oh, it was nothing. I was probably doing 60 kilograms or something,
And
just
how much did you weigh?
high reps.
Okay.
I'm a pretty big dude. I was probably up around 90 kegs or something.
Okay.
So
So
it
it
wasn't,
wasn't
it
even
wasn't,
close to your body weight.
no, no, it was just like probably poor form and doing lots and an old injury, you know.
Okay. Did you know at that time, like right while you were lifting, that you had injured yourself, or did it come later?
No, I knew at the time. It was an old basketball injury that had, sort of derailed my semi-professional career at the end of that when I was sort of playing and working. I It was already there and I knew that I was like, oh, this is a real bad one this time.
Nice. And so you gain this insight on the mind-body connection. You helped yourself. You continue to study. Starting a new business without much brand or recognition or customers, how did you get your first set of customers to grow EQ Minds to help other people with similar problems?
Yeah. So, and my wife deserves all the credit for this because she was in the initial days doing, all of the heavy lifting. And we both were lucky. We came from sales backgrounds. Both of us came from sales backgrounds. And when you start out, it is hard, right? You've got to get those first brands on your books to show, prove the concept. You've got to knock on a lot of doors. You've got to eat a lot of, what? You've got to hear no a lot of times. And she was just relentless. So she was out having coffees with every single person she could, anyone she knew. She was catching the train from down where we live up to Sydney every other day for a coffee. She was doing the hard work. And eventually, one of those coffees led to a conversation with at eBay. And so eBay was our first ever client.
Wow.
When you get a brand like eBay on the books, it certainly starts to open some other doors. And it is a small industry, or Sydney's small, and one person knows another person. You do a good job, and it opens up another door, and you're sort of up and running. But it was very hard at the start, and she deserves a lot of credit because for a lot of time you don't earn any revenue.
Yeah. How long did it take to get the first customer to get eBay?
Well, it depends if you sort of look from the very start of the time when the business, sort of depends on when you say the business actually starts, right? Is it the time you go out and do all the paperwork and get the
Well, when you started looking, like when you started trying to get your customer to when you,
yeah, I would well, it was probably 6 months before we generated
that's
any
pretty
revenue.
good.
Y Yeah, not too bad,
Not bad.
not too bad, but it's still 6 months that you're not used to not earning any revenue. Like, don't get me wrong, we were very fortunate, hedged our bets, and I was still working the bank, so everything was great, and to be perfectly honest, when she started this, I thought, "Oh, this is gonna be a bit of a hobby," and she certainly proved me wrong.
Nice. And so going to a company like eBay and subsequent customers, how do you price the value of mental health to deliver this service to them? How did you package this value that you discovered?
That is a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's not only for mental health, but anyone that does training or any kind of services or consultancy, how do you price it? Because you're not just pricing it for the 1
It's
hour.
not the hour, no.
Yeah, with the customer, it's the 20 years of experience that you've had in order to get to that position to be able to deliver value to them. And that's hard. That also means backing yourself as well, because lots of people, and especially, as we've grown our business and we've brought new speakers on, we say, okay, this is the price we're going to charge. And they're like, wow, I can't charge that. That's too much. It's, how are we going to get that? It's like, but you're not charging, again, you're not just charging for that. It's everything that goes into that. And so it's very hard for people that start businesses, I think, to price right. And there's a lot of when you can go out and test the market, before you create the product, you go out and have conversations, you do your A/B testing, and you make sure that, if you go out and try and sell a widget for A, are people going to buy it at A, or do they want to spend A plus two, or whatever it is? So it is hard, but I think you just got to back yourself and also have lots and lots of conversations with people.
Yeah. Were there any moments of doubt? You thought maybe this might take longer than a year, or maybe it will just remain a hobby project?
From me, there certainly was. Like, I'm, an accountant and economist by training, so I've sort of learned to look at risk and likelihood of things. So I was thinking, oh, I don't know if this thing's going to work. But I still remember to this day I think it was a funny conversation I had with my wife, and I said, sort of, what's the chance that this thing's not going to work? And she looked at me straight in the eyes and said, 0% chance that it's not going to work. And I said, well, I don't think you understood the question. That's not really how it works. Like, no, 0%. It's 100% going to be success. And I think in a lot of ways, founders need that. They
Okay.
need to this sort of unrealistic expectation they're going to succeed, because if, it is hard to be a founder, it's hard to start a business, and you are going to get a lot of no's, and a lot of people are going to say this is silly or it's not going to work. And that grit and determination will be needed when the doors get slammed in your face, because that will definitely happen.
Yeah. I'm so curious. So for the people at eBay, can you share a little bit about what the experience is like when EQ Mine enters? What do the people go through?
So we do it in a variety of different ways. So you might just have us in for a conference where you
Mhm.
say, we're doing an offsite or we're doing a conference, and we need someone to come in and provide a motivational speech. And, we want to do it a little bit differently this year. We want to make sure it's upbeat. We want to give people some practical tools to help them not only with their mental health, but their performance at work and at home as well. We need a speaker for it. And so we would come in and, we like to say, we've had the corporate experience, we've studied in, psychology and neuroscience. So we bring that theory, but we match it with real practical outcomes. It's great when you go and hear someone speak, give a real motivational speech, and they've got an amazing story, but it's like, what can I actually take from that? What's the practical tool that I can implement into my life that's really simple? Because if it's hard, we're not going to do it. So we like to think we bring these simple, practical tools to people that they can actually do, as soon as they walk out of the session. So that's on the conference side of things. And then we also do longer form workshops, which is, again, just sort of deeper dives into various challenges that people face in the workplace. That might be stress, it might be resilience, it might be mental health conversations, or it could be we're just trying to improve the workplace well-being of our teams, do a little bit of a give back, or indeed we want to improve their performance and their productivity. And we sort of have sessions based on all of those different things and the needs of the client. And then, of course, we've got longer form wellbeing programs where we sort of do all things mindfulness and mental health in terms of improving your performance at work. And so you would come in and you would choose a series of workshops based on a whole variety of topics, all things that help improve your mental health and your performance. So there's lots of workshops, and we have a variety of different speakers that are specialists in different areas.
In my product background, most of my time, we're looking at problems we want to solve and the metrics of success. So when you engage with these companies, do they have a set of metrics that they are trying to affect, or what to them is a measure of success post EQ Minds? What are they expecting as a sign that it was as expected?
Yeah, and it's different for each engagement, although there's obviously some general themes. They might have done well-being surveys with their people or engagement surveys, and maybe they're not where they want to be or they want to improve them. Alternatively, it might just be that they can tell that their staff are really stressed, or they're going through a significant period of change and they need some practical tools to be able to manage that a little bit better. And so we will come in and we do surveys at the end of our sessions to see how they were received. When we do our wellbeing programs, there's a whole variety of different indicators we use along the journey, at the end of the journey, just to make sure that it's all moving in the right space. But a lot of the time when we're doing conferences, it's really about engagement. Did the people come to this session? Did they have a great time? Are they motivated to go back and really put some of these tools into their lives?
What is the hardest thing, most challenging thing with the topics that you discuss with people for them to implement in their lives? Because I think I go to many speaker events and you get inspired and great, my life's going to change. It's going to be amazing. I have all these tools I'm going to try. But implementing in your routines and changing your own behaviors, I mean, now at 42 is one of the most challenging things that I struggle with. What do you find are the most difficult things for your participants?
Well, I think everyone is very, very busy in today's modern world. And so sometimes people need some form of friction to say that I can't keep doing what I'm doing because the results aren't giving me my actions aren't giving me the results that I need. And for different people, that friction level is different. It takes a full trauma or catastrophe, and then they go, I need to make change. For other people, it's like, well, I'm into incremental gain and
Mhm.
I want to just try one of these little practical tools to see how it makes me feel. So I think everyone's sort of on their own journey, and we certainly speak to people, do a lot around habits and behaviors, some little things that we can do to try and make sure that when times get stressful, when times get busy, we just don't go back to those old habits that potentially aren't serving us very well as they could anyway.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a growing customer base with different offerings for different businesses with different needs. What do you see in EQ Minds as most challenging now in this stage in your business?
Don't take this the wrong way, especially if any of my team is listening. We have an amazing team and we got great people, but it's taken us a lot of zigs and zags to get to this place. And I still think no matter how good your people are still the biggest challenge that we face, especially we went through a growth phase. We're only a small company, but we sort of got up to 11 people at one point. And, you have those growing pains of maybe people aren't the right fit, or maybe we do a poor job of managing expectations. People are just people, right? There's things that pop up, and the more people you have, there's more things that need to be managed. But again, the team that we have is fantastic, and we are super lucky. But I don't know that I'm ever going to get any superstar rating on my ability to choose the right people for the team, because I think sometimes for me it's just luck.
Are there any things that you do differently now that you learned from your past, or is it still pretty much random?
No, there's a few things that we do. Obviously, value alignment is a huge part of what we do. Trying to uncover people's values is sometimes, challenging, because people will often say what, they want you to hear. But I think value alignment is a big thing. It's a bit like choosing a partner in life.
Yeah.
You sort of want to look at some of their relationships. Yeah, how do they treat their mum? How do they treat their grandma? And I really like taking people to out for a coffee to see how they treat the wait staff.
Yes.
Are
Mm.
they respectful to the wait staff, or are they rude or dismissive? And that for me is a huge flag. And probably if you're out in the dating world, should be a huge flag for you.
Seeing how people treat wait staff, how they treat their friends. One of my friends mentioned, see how people treat trolleys. Are they the person that leaves a cart in the middle of the parking lot? Are they the
That's
person
a
that like
good,
pushes it all the way back in and secures it with the rest of the other ones? Or they're
that's
somewhere
a
in the middle?
that's a really good one. That's a great one.
Hard for an interview. Take them shopping. Growing into the future, what are some of the things, at least post-COVID restrictions, having lived in Victoria during part of it, I see mental health being a big challenge without knowing some of the repercussions of the lockdowns. What do you see in the future of workplace well-being trends, of things that will be implemented by companies or that you would love to see being implemented in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, especially if you're in the corporate space or you're in the business space, you've probably seen that since COVID, it really accelerated the understanding of mental health and the need for mental health initiatives because it was such a challenge. And it turns out being isolated from people is really, really bad for it.
Yeah.
Which is, it's very scary because Australia is going through a loneliness epidemic at the moment. In fact, the most of the developed world is going through a loneliness epidemic at the moment, especially for young males.
Hmm.
And so that is very concerning when it comes to statistics around mental health. I also think it's crazy, right? We're more connected than we've ever been, and yet we're more disconnected. The phone does not replace real relationships, and that's going to be a real challenge. So I certainly see the statistics for mental health getting worse. Now, some of that might be just because, the younger generation is so much better at talking about it and being aware of it. And maybe that's influencing the statistics as well. And maybe at times we've probably gone a little bit too far and there's a little bit too much of oversharing. But going to be, there's no doubt there's going to be the concerning trend that is occurring will continue, which is really sad. It probably means our business will be very busy for a long time to come. But I don't know that it's that great for, just society, to be perfectly honest with you. Whether it starts to come back, and hopefully we're starting to see, some initiatives coming around, like the social media banning for under 16-year-olds. I think it's a great first step because the phones are such a problem. Social media is such a problem. Maybe we're going to start seeing, I heard that hashtag bring back the flip, which is,
No.
bring back the simple smartphones because it's not good for us. It's terrible for us, all of that stuff. Now, it's not to say some of the uses aren't good for us. They certainly are. It can be great for business. It can actually provide communities for people that can't find other communities in different places.
Hmm.
But it's not a real replacement for human connection. So yeah, that's sort of, hopefully that answers the question for you.
So many interesting parts to what you said. I'm curious why you think there's more impact on males than females in the growing problem.
Again, very good question. I think males, there's been a change, and I'm probably going to waffle on here a little bit, but there's been a little, and I don't want to get on my soapbox too much. There's been a change in the social structures around, it used to be that males were the breadwinners and, they went out, they looked after their tribe, they came back. That's completely changed. Women are in the workforce now. That's changed the dynamics of it. Sometimes it's harder for males to get jobs. Maybe, when people get isolated or people, don't feel like they're have that same purpose or sense, then that leads to people, potentially joining groups that or echo chambers, I should say, that really, maybe these more radical views start to come about, and it leads people down a path it's not so positive for society. I appreciate that's on an extreme view, but I think we're seeing more and more of that. We're also seeing more and more of these haves and have-nots, especially now with the ability to communicate so much. If you've got a phone and you're not earning much money, and you're seeing all these other people that are, living their best life on social media, that's not making people feel very good.
Mhm.
And it's probably causing a little bit more division as well.
Yeah, I heard your comment around we think potentially the younger generation's better at communicating. I really doubt the multiple emojis is expressing the true feelings. I often wonder about the future with the shorter attention span, with even songs now on Spotify have reduced its length. When I grew up, songs were about 4 minutes, and I think the average length of songs have reduced to under 3 minutes because of the attention span. People don't really want to hear a long song. They just want lots of different songs. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves.
Especially with the trend of all the videos now on TikToks and everything are on this tiny little bite size. So we really are in the attention economy. So everyone's vying for attention. And it's sort of, unfortunately, when you're vying for people's attention, it starts bringing out not the best in people, because people are attracted to things that are the loud, brash, violent, all of those different things. And so, yeah, there does seem to be a little bit of a value alignment needed. I'm not of the belief that people's attention is not any better anymore. I think people's attention is still probably pretty good. It's just that there's so many distractions everywhere. If you're really focused on something, I'm sure you can focus on it for a long time when you're really interested and passionate about it. It's just that there's all these distractions around us that are constantly vying for our attention.
I didn't realize this was odd that I did this until I shared it with other people. But when I used to work, I would listen to one track for the whole day in repeat. And I needed some distraction in order to focus. I'm hyper focused, but I need a little bit of distraction. And it was worse for me to hear the noise around the office because it's random and you're not expecting to hear things. And then they distract you, rather than a predictable track that's playing in loop in the background, like white noise. Sometimes it didn't really matter. Sometimes it was classical music, sometimes it was pop music, but it was the same track. So then there were no surprises for the day. Yeah.
Your brain just must get used to that loop. Lots of people, I don't know if you ever listen to binaural beats, which is
Oh,
non-lyrical.
yeah.
It's been shown to improve your focus. And so that can be really helpful if, you've got all those distractions. Or, of course, if you're in an open office, always stick on a headset. People will think you're busy, even if you're not, and hopefully leave you alone.
Well, I was listening to a sleep doctor talk about this, is the value of having a white noise machine, not necessarily to hear the white noise, but because the white noise will drown out surprise sounds like a car driving by or someone slamming a door closed quickly, because those can jolt you. But if it's muted by consistent white noise, then your body will not recognize it. So I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not that odd. Works for sleep.
That's correct. I mean, that makes sense. I listen to these basketball podcasts to go to sleep, and
Do
I
you?
guess it's around that as well, right? It's something that's not overly interesting, and maybe it's just blocking out those things that would normally wake me up, or stopping my own mind from wandering.
Exactly. Our next topic that I wanted to cover are misconceptions that people have around mindfulness and productivity, because these have become buzzwords during COVID. I'm not sure what it says about me or my friends, but someone gifted me a 1-year membership to Headspace during COVID. And I started using their sleepcast, and I started using their daily meditation pieces. So meditation, mindfulness, what are the things that you see in your view is not accurate of what mindfulness is? So explain to us what to you mindfulness is.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I don't listen to a lot of media, so maybe but I'll talk about some general misconceptions that I hear about. I think the big one I hear about is mindfulness is just meditation, and you need to have a meditation practice in order to be mindful. And I just don't think that's the case. Meditation is one tool in thousands of different tools that can be used to improve your mindfulness. Now, meditation's amazing. It's fantastic. It works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for some, but it's only one of the tools that exists. Mindfulness to me is just the intentional use of our attention. And again, you can use a variety of different things in order to do that, but literally just focusing on the thing that you're doing, well, that's being mindful. And when it comes to productivity, that will help with productivity. If you're actually fully into the task at hand, there's no doubt you're going to do a better job of it. It's been shown that multitasking is not good. When we're switching
Mhm.
between tasks, it doesn't work for our productivity. If your mind's wandering while you're doing your task, you're not going to be very good at it. So that's probably some of the common misconceptions that I hear about mindfulness.
Yeah. And what would you like to see companies implement more within their companies to help support positive mental health?
So there's so many companies out there doing, they've got great initiatives. They give so many opportunities to their staff. Sometimes the staff take it up. Sometimes a lot of these initiatives sort of don't get taken up, which I think is a real shame. But I think if you really want to address some of the mental health concerns that do exist, it's actually changing around some of the job controls and some of the workplace stresses that exist. And it could be as simple as not allowing certain behaviors from staff that are causing stress. It might be that some of your clients cause you stress, and are they really clients that you want to be dealing with? So it might be overloading your staff with different tasks. And we see this in all types of businesses where some people are just completely at their max or past their max, and then other staff members are just cruising along doing as little as possible. And so some of those job controls that exist can certainly help improve the mental well-being of staff across businesses and probably across all different facets of life as well.
Yeah. Would love your view on something is that I've lived in countries where life is pretty low stress. Most things are taken care of. And then other ones where it's quite chaotic and you have to almost watch your back all the time, different extremes. And sometimes when things are too easy and smooth, I feel you're no longer being challenged and growing as a person. And so where do you draw the line of what's healthy level of stress to keep pushing you to strive and improve yourself versus no stress and then being complacent or losing motivation? What's your view on this? Like the level of stress that's good for one's health?
Yeah, it's a fantastic observation and something that in our household we talk about a lot, especially because we've got a young family, we've got a 9-year-old. So challenging our children, and if you've ever heard of Dr. Daniel Amen, he's an amazing doctor out of the US, and he talks about, we're doing our kids a disservice by taking all of the stress out of their lives.
Yeah.
We try to take all of the friction from their life and make it
Mhm.
as easy as possible, and because of that, we have this real resilience crisis because when they move out of home or they get older or they're faced with any type of adversity, they don't know how to tackle it because they've never had any challenging situations in their life. So it's something that I'm really interested in. I've been doing some studies in that space and learned that we can actually strengthen our brains to become more resilient. And there's certain parts of our brain, interior cingulate cortex, that we can actually strengthen that part of our brain, and I'm sure many other parts as well, to become more resilient by doing hard things. Now, and it's actually doing hard things that we don't like doing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy to give your kids something that's hard that they don't like to do because pretty much everything you give them that's hard. But I think it's really important that we stop, just making it so easy for our children because we are going to have real resilience problems. When it comes to how much people can actually face, well, I think you could build up a bit of a tolerance. And if you've never had any adversity in your life, you probably haven't built any self efficacy, and therefore you've got very little chance of managing any stress in your life. Whereas other people sort of build that up. So it's probably different for everyone. And their circumstances are different for everyone, but it's something that I think we should all work on, and all of us should be doing hard things all the time because I think it's really important for us to grow. And then, sorry, I'm talking so much on this one, but the other one is you spoke about if you don't have any stress in your life, you're not really challenging yourself. And I think that is so very true. You're probably not giving life a red hot crack.
Yeah.
So you want to have some challenges. You want to be motivated. You want to be moving in the right direction. And certainly for the people that are listening to this podcast, if you're a founder or you're in business, you're going to have some resilience. You're going to have to be doing hard things because if you're not, it's probably unlikely that that business is going to succeed.
Yeah. What are the signs when it's too much, when it's no longer healthy?
Yeah, again, it is different for everyone, but understanding what your not only what your triggers are, but what your responses are is super important. And I actually think we do an activity in one of my sessions where we take time to actually reflect on a stressful moment and say, how did I feel? Not only from a physical perspective, but a mental perspective as well. When I'm stressed, do my behaviors change? Do my habits change? Do I have sensory changes? Because understanding that's really important so that you can actually go, oh, this is actually not really eustress anymore. This is distress. And so I need to make some changes in my life. Again, it is different for everyone. But if your habits start changing, if you start going into these bad habit loops or really negative thinking, it's probably time to start making some changes to move more towards the positive and reduce that burnout that you're facing.
Yeah. And what advice do you have for people who then recognize they are in that state where it's too much stress? Like, what tell them?
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, you firstly remove that stressor. Now, that's not always realistic. We have to work. There's things that go on in our lives. Families can be very stressful. Friends can be stressful. So sometimes it's not always as easy as just removing the stressor. But I think it's really important that you go back to the basics.
Okay.
And the basics are you need to make sure you're sleeping well, because if you're not sleeping well, the chance of you being resilient and being able to push through that is, diminished significantly. You need to get back to fueling your body with the right things, looking after your nutrition, making sure you're eating well. Because again, if you're not eating well, then your blood sugar's going all over the shop. You're going to have real challenges making good decisions. You need to exercise. Exercise has been shown to improve your mood significantly.
Yes.
Exercise, making sure that you're taking time out, blocking time out to exercise every day. Do the exercise that you like. It doesn't have to be going for a marathon or doing something that you really hate doing. Do some exercise that you like, but get back to the basics. And then probably for many people, especially the type A who just go and go and go, they probably need to learn how to say no as well and say no to a few things in their life. And then the final thing I would say on this point is just put your phone away. Like, how many people, tell me I don't have time for anything, or I'm
Mhm.
so stressed, and then you look at their screen time and they're on their phone for 6 hours a day. Well, how benefiting anyone? So, the phone's an amazing productivity tool, but it's also our worst enemy when it comes to, finding balance in our life.
Yeah, and connection. I think there's a social scientist who talked about how AirPods is one of like the biggest obstacles to human connection because we no longer have these ad hoc interactions when we're walking on the street or doing our shopping or just doing our daily errands.
I was on a plane back from Melbourne yesterday. The guy next to me didn't have AirPods on. We had a great chat to start the plane trip off. The other guy had his AirPods on. We didn't say boo to each other. So yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, great point.
Yeah. And so coming up to the end of our episode, what advice do you have for the next generation of employees, but also entrepreneurs that you've learned through your journey that you want to pass on?
Well, I might take some words of wisdom from you, Ray.
I don't have much of wisdom to
Oh,
pass on.
no, you've already told me. Yeah, do more hard things,
Yeah.
right? Do things that challenge yourself. Do things that are difficult. If you're playing the safe lane, then the odds of you being exceptional is going to be very challenging to achieve. If I could speak to my younger self, I would probably say take more risk in life. Didn't really regret anything that I ever failed at, but I certainly regret a few things that I didn't chase hard enough. So probably take a little bit more risk. Those are probably the things I would say.
Yeah. Okay. And for the listeners who would like to know more about EQ Minds, what is the best way to follow your journey or contact you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, Jay Pottinger on LinkedIn. Alternatively, jump onto Instagram and our company account, EQ Minds. I got to admit, I'm not big on socials, but our company has quite a presence there. So at EQ Minds Instagram, and we share a lot of tools and tips for people to hopefully live happier and healthier lives and also perform better.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Ray. Thanks for having me.